that, at least, is the way that George Gershwin described it in his operatic musical, For the Effects. For some, that is indeed true. Days at the beach, relaxing at poolside with a tall glass of iced tea, fishing along some river or in the ocean, band concerts, and picnics in the park. Yes, those are the images which come to mind when we think of summertime, when the living is easy. Yet, as Gershwin himself also expressed it for you best, it ain't necessarily so. I was raised on a farm back in Iowa, and summertime was for growing crops. Indeed, a great deal of the time and effort associated with that was taken up with weeds, eradicating various and sundry types of lousy, stinky, horrible weeds. For me, it was primarily the dreaded Canadian thistle. These prickly weeds include animal-feeding crops in which the thistles had been harvested along with the crop. Cattle, for example, would avoid bites of alfalfa and clover in which Canadian thistles had also been veiled. Much of my time was accordingly consumed with eradicating these dastardly weeds. Cutting them or pulling them outside the roots usually proved unsuccessful. If you weren't able to eradicate the entire plant with its root system, new plants would soon emerge from what was left behind. Spraying was the most effective way of dealing with these miserable weeds, but it is time-consuming and not often successful. Weeds in general, and the Canadian thistle in particular, took the easiness out of summertime living. And that's certainly nothing new. Since time immemorial, human beings have been confronting weeds. It's a frustrating and tiring ordeal. Indeed, the Bane of Existence. If you have a garden, you know what I'm talking about. We plant the seed and scatter the good seed on the ground. But instead of the desired plants, we are blessed, or perhaps better expressed, cursed with weeds. Indeed, there's a second name for the Canadian thistle. It's called the cursed thistle. Weeds are frustrating and discouraging. And even if you don't have a garden, lawns regularly fall victim to infestations of weeds. From time to time, I even noted a Canadian thistle along the way in my own lawn. The sermon topic for this past Sunday, you may recall, dealt with seed, specifically the seed of the gospel, and various types of soil in which the seed was planted. In today's gospel, Jesus talks about weeds, dirty and disgusting weeds. I don't know whether Jesus was ever hired by a neighbor as a youngster to go out tackling an infestation of weeds, but it's evident from this parable that Jesus was familiar with weeds and trying to be rid of the weeds. In this parable, he recounts that the servants of a certain farmer discovered that weeds had grown up amidst the plants, likely wheat, which a farmer was trying to cultivate and grow. Particularly annoying in Jesus' day was a plant known as the bearded garlic. In its initial stages, this plant had an uncanny ability of blending in and camouflaging itself alongside the wheat, which of course is the staple most farmers are trying to produce. Tradition had it that the bearded garlic came into existence during the antediluvian period, that is, the time before Noah, when the whole of creation went astray, committed fornication, and brought forth contrary to nature. Close resemblance to wheat in its initial stages, bearded darnel was held to be a kind of degenerate wheat which had simply gone wrong. Bearded darnel, or tares as we've come to translate it, had to be eradicated from the wheat because the grain of bearded darnel is slightly poisonous. It occasions dizziness and sickness, and in fact is narcotic in its effects. Even a small bit of it has a bitter and unpleasant taste. So in the end, it had to be separated by hand. Typically, women would sit about with large trays in which the grains of wheat, as well as the tares or bearded darnel, had been deposited. Each seed of darnel, which turned a slate gray color at the time of harvest, had to be painstakingly removed from the wheat. It was tedious and mundane work, to be sure. So it was work that needed to be accomplished, or else the bread would be distasteful, as well as potentially narcotic. Now, the farmer in the parable attributes the weeds, the presence of the weeds, to some enemy who's come and spread weed seed in the very area in which the farmer had spread seed for his crops. That would seem to be a very dastardly thing to do. And apparently, from time to time, it actually was done. His commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, William Barclay notes that there were Roman legal codes mentioning such a crime and laying out punishment for it. Even today in India, I'm told, one of the direst threats which a man can make to his enemy is simply this: I will sow bad seed in your field. It certainly was a means for attacking and undermining and frustrating the good efforts of the neighbor. In Jesus' parable, the servants approach the master with a description of the problem. And then they ask, do you want us to go out and pull out the tares? The master responds in the negative, lest in gathering the weeds, servants also will uproot the wheat. The roots of the plants will regularly become intertwined and interconnected. And so it's impossible to extricate the one without also uprooting the other. You have to let the wheat and the bearded dharma grow together until both can be harvested and painstakingly separated. Now, it's likely that some would just go ahead and pull out the bearded dharma anyway. Even wood damage should destroy the wheat as well. It could be suggested that even God himself had done this at the time of Noah when he wiped out all of the humankind when it rained for 40 days and for 40 nights. The whole earth was flooded, and all life except for Noah and those within on the ark was destroyed. Yet how did that work out? It was only a matter of days before sinfulness was again evident upon the face of the earth. There are those of you, I'm sure, who may have difficulty relating, though, to this parable. After all, it does stem from an agricultural background. And there are fewer and fewer farms around these days. People don't tend to cultivate vegetable gardens either, since it's easy to pop into a supermarket and simply plop down a couple bucks and pick up some fresh fruits and vegetables. For some of you, then, I included this particular analogy in this parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a programmer who started many processes on her computer. But while everyone was sleeping, a hacker broke in and started some counterfeit jobs, which began using some of the CPU, that is the central processing unit's time. The programmer's assistant said, "Didn't you start useful jobs on the computer? Where then did these counterfeits come from?" "A computer hacker did this," she responded. The assistant then asked her, "Do you want us to kill the jobs?" "No," she replied, "because while you were killing them, some good processes might be interrupted by accident. Let them all go to completion. Then we will purge every counterfeit process from the disk and memory and save the results of every good process onto permanent tape." Whether you have a garden day or whether you have a computer, you know it is possible for things to become corrupt. On computers, they're usually called viruses. In gardens and lawns, they're typically referred to as weeds. It prompts a very natural question. What then are we to do? Not let those who are computer geeks suggest how to handle computers. I know a little bit more about weeds and gardens, so I'll use that image. The first thing to realize is that there will come a time of harvest. While we may now be in a growing season at this time of the year, harvest will be forthcoming. And in biblical thinking, harvest is another way of referring to judgment. The judgment is an important fact of life. Well, someone was making the off-her remark, "Everything happens for a reason." One observer responded, "Yes, and the reason is found in Galatians 6, verse 7. Whatever a man sows, that also will he reap." It is often, if not generally the case, that some things happen to us because we are reaping simply what we have sown. You play, you pay, it is said in common parlance. While that's not necessarily always the case, it is certainly true in general. We reap what we sow. If we sow seeds toward the fruit of the flesh, as the Apostle Paul expressed it in Galatians 5, we can expect to harvest that fruit, which the Apostle Paul lists as these: sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. On the other hand, if we sow seeds to the Spirit, then we can expect a harvest of the fruit of the Spirit, which Paul lists as love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Be sure there are instances in which innocent people are punished for the sins of others. Consider, for example, the drunk driver who may have an accident cause serious bodily and emotional harm to others. That's condemnable. Some spouses suffer for the waywardness of their partners, and that's not fair either. Still, in general, we will reap what we ourselves have sown. A bumper sticker makes the point this way, and I quote, "Honk if you love Jesus. Text while driving if you want to meet him." In the vast majority of cases, you reap what you sow. This, however, can lead to a temptation to try to figure out what other people are going to reap. Incidental, to be sure, but there are those persons who seem to delight in separating people into the acceptable and the unacceptable, the worthy versus the unworthy.